In this video, you'll discover why Francis of Paola, though not widely known, may be considered one of the most intriguing mystics to have ever lived. He was a 15th century Italian miracle worker, and hundreds of years after his death, in a number of different countries around the world, there are Francis of Paola statues, monuments, and celebrations to honor him. But why is Francis of Paola remembered with such love and respect? He was renowned for his magical powers over the natural world, including the ability to command fire, move massive boulders, and converse with animals. He was said to have performed miraculous healings, even curing entire villages of the plague. He is also credited with restoring vision to the blind and raising the dead on several occasions. Although many people associate the name Saint Francis with Francis of Assisi, some argue that Francis of Paola's life was even more miraculous and even more sensational. Despite this, there is relatively little information available about him in the English language. Ashley and I are an everyday couple from Canada, and we were inspired to travel to Italy, learn more, capture video footage, and share the enchanting story of Francis of Paola. Even if no one watches our video, we're still excited to share the story of Francis of Paola with our friends, like little Nicholas the woodpecker, and all the little forest angels. The story of Francis of Paola begins before his birth. Giacomo and Vienna d'Alessio prayed to Francis of Assisi for help in having a child after years of trying. One night, their neighbors were awestruck to see dancing flames above the d'Alessio's home. The d'Alessio's came outside and were just as puzzled as their neighbors. They concluded that the bizarre phenomena was a sign from a higher power, and 9 months later, Francis of Paola was born. And a month after his birth, little Francis developed a severe infection in one eye. His parents prayed to Francis of Assisi again, this time promising that if he provided a miracle cure, they would have their son Francis wear the monk outfit and serve for 1 year in a Franciscan monastery. And after this prayer, Francis's eye was mysteriously healed. Francis of Paola woke up one night to find his room filled with light and St. Francis of Assisi standing at his bed. St. Francis of Assisi told him that it was time for him to fulfill his mother's promise to serve in the Franciscan monastery. While at the monastery, Francis of Paola is said to have performed a number of miracles that absolutely amazed the monks. For example, one time he made the sign of the cross in front of a fireplace, which magically caused it to burst into flames and boil a pot to cook their food on time. Who needs a microwave? After a year of serving in the monastery, Francis moved out and started to live in a little cave. Francis soon attracted a large following of people who were drawn to his wisdom and spiritual guidance and the fact he lived in a cool cave. In the spirit of Francis of Assisi, he would lead people to live a life of humility and loving service. The story of Paola's healing spring is one of wonder. In the year 1436, during the construction of a church, workers complained of thirst and the long distance they had to go to access water. In response, Francis of Paola struck a rock wall and a spring of water gushed out. This spring, known as the Cucurella, still flows today. Upon arrival, we discovered that the healing spring was behind a locked door, and we weren't alone. A praying mantis, whom we named Brigida, greeted us on the door. She joined us throughout our entire tour of the St. Francis Sanctuary. During our exploration, we encountered a World War II bomb that had been dropped into the nearby stream, but did not explode. This is believed to be due to the divine intervention of Francis of Paola. Here, Brigida uses her little leg to point out the Grotto of Penance, a small cave where Francis would spend entire days and nights in prayer. This is Francis of Paola's furnace in Italy. It's the site of legendary miracles. On one occasion, we're told that some hungry workmen had caught, slaughtered, and ate Francis's pet lamb, Martinello. When Francis found out what had happened, he asked what they had done with the remains of the poor lamb. The workers told him they had thrown all the leftover fleece and bones into this furnace. In response, Francis walked over to the furnace, which was roaring with flames, looked inside and called out, "Martinello, come out!" To the amazement of all present, the lamb leaped out of the furnace, alive and well, making happy sounds upon seeing his master again. This is the story of Francis of Paola's miracle of multiplying the bread in Arena, Italy. Francis of Paola was facing a hungry crowd that had forgotten food for a meeting. Francis turned to one of them, named Nicola Bonaro, and said, "Give me your pouch. I am certain that there is bread in it." To the amazement of all, Francis reached into Nicola's pouch and pulled out a loaf of bread that was hot, as if it had just been taken out of an oven. He shared the bread with the people, and as he did, the bread multiplied, allowing everyone to eat their fill with still plenty left over, reminding people of the miracles of Christ in the desert. The Pope had heard reports about the amazing miracles of Francis of Paola and was unsure of what to think, so he sent a representative to investigate him. Francis and his followers adhered to a strict plant-based diet, primarily consuming fruits and vegetables, abstaining from all animal products. This concerned the Pope's representative, who criticized Francis for setting an example that was too severe. However, Francis demonstrated his faith by picking up and holding burning hot coals and showing that his hands remained unharmed despite the intense, burning heat. He was demonstrating that through the grace of a higher power, a person could endure extreme conditions if necessary. Francis's miraculous demonstration won over the approval of the Pope and his representatives. They considered him to be divinely guided. Francis of Paola performed one of his most breathtaking miracles at the Strait of Messina, where he and his companions were unable to pay for a boatman to take them across from southern Italy to Sicily. He knelt down and prayed about what to do next. Then he got up and spread his cloak on the waves. We're told that he sailed 4 miles smoothly and effortlessly on his cloak, using his staff as a sail, leaving the onlooking boatmen in wonder and awe. And as he approached the shore of Messina, a large crowd had gathered to see the miraculous sight. He sailed to a secluded area of the shoreline and made his landing. And because of stories like these, Francis of Paola became the patron saint of boatmen, mariners, and naval officers. Similar to Christ, Francis of Paola was known for performing miraculous healings. At one point, a young mother gave birth to a boy who was born without eyes and with a horribly deformed face. With the index finger of his right hand, Francis traced the outlines of a mouth and eyes on the distorted face of the baby. As he did so, the mouth and eyes appeared as if by magic. And after that, the baby had a normal, happy face. Francis of Paola was also famous for his ability to resurrect the dead. Francis and his companions once came across the dead body of a man who had been hanged. Francis asked his companions to bring the corpse down to him. He then lifted his eyes to the sky and prayed, and the man was miraculously restored back to life. Realizing what had happened, the man was filled with gratitude and became a devoted follower of Francis. The miracle of Martinello the donkey begins when Francis of Paola was traveling through Lauria, Italy. He noticed Martinello the donkey had worn out his shoes. They stopped at a blacksmith's shop, and Francis asked if the blacksmith could provide new shoes for the donkey in the name of charity. The blacksmith nailed the new shoes onto Martinello's hooves, and when the job was done, he insisted on payment. When Francis explained that they had no money to pay, the blacksmith became very angry. Francis calmly told Martinello to give the shoes back, and the donkey obediently shook his hooves, and the shoes magically fell off. After witnessing this, the blacksmith was shocked, humiliated, and repentant. The great mystic Francis of Paola was once invited to stay with King Ferrante of Naples. The king had doubts about Francis and wanted to test Francis's discipline to his vegan diet. The king had a young servant named Girolamo Cavaniglia. He ordered Girolamo to bring a plate of cooked fish to see if he could tempt Francis to eat any of it. When Girolamo placed the fish down, Francis passed his hands over top of the fish, and the fish were brought back to life and started moving around. Imagine how shocked young Girolamo must have been. Then Francis told Girolamo to carry the dear little fish back to the king. Girolamo raced back. King Ferrante was stunned to see that the fish had been brought back to life. He put the fish on display in vases, where they became a source of wonder for the royal court. Francis of Paola was committed to a life of poverty and service to the poor, but King Ferrante of Naples couldn't believe why anyone would want to be committed to poverty, so he tried to test Francis by offering him coins in private. Francis took one of the coins and magically split it into two, and drops of blood dripped from the two halves. He declared that the blood represented the suffering of the innocent people King Ferrante had enslaved. The king was so disturbed by this that he couldn't even speak. By the end of this visit, King Ferrante was a true believer in Francis. He even hired an artist to paint this portrait of him by spying on him through a peephole. That's a sneaky way to honor somebody. Also, here's a sneaky cute chipmunk. According to legend, Francis of Paola used his supernatural powers to cure entire villages of the plague. For example, there was a plague outbreak in Burma, France, causing much fear, suffering, and death. The church crowded with people, all seeking a miracle from Francis. We're told that Francis made the sign of the cross over them, and they were all instantly healed. People were so grateful that they flocked to him, and in their enthusiasm, they even tore off pieces of his monk outfit. But the legends say that his monk outfit immediately grew back any piece that was torn off. That's good quality clothing. And as Francis prepared to leave, a large crowd gathered to thank him. Unable to make his way through the packed crowd, Francis used his supernatural powers to disappear before their eyes. He then reappeared before his travel companions outside the city walls, and to this day, Bourg-les-Mimosas, France celebrates him every year on May 4th. Francis of Paola's reputation as a miracle healer became widely known, and King Louis XI of France, known for his cruelty, sent for him. Francis only agreed to go because the Pope ordered him to do so. King Louis had a reputation for being mean and sneaky, so people called him the Spider King. When they met, King Louis hoped that Francis would physically heal him, but Francis told him it wasn't the will of God for him to be healed, and that it was important to focus on being a better person and healing his indifference to love. Francis understood that our time on earth is brief, and that our ultimate goal should be spiritual progress rather than just prolonging the physical life. King Louis was inspired by Francis and started to see the importance of being a more loving person above all else. And despite not being physically healed, he died a peaceful and loving man thanks to the guidance of Francis. Just like Jesus, Francis of Paola died on Good Friday. After a life of love and service to other people, he passed away with great humility by confessing to not always being as devoted as he could have been. He asked for forgiveness and prayed for others before returning to his home in spirit. He's known as the patron saint of boatmen and epidemics, but his life also sets him apart as a saint of miracles. Francis lived by the principle of charitas, which encompasses love and compassion for all. Let's follow in the footsteps of Francis by making a sincere daily effort to have more love for other people, more love for animals, more love for little creatures, more love for God, and more love for ourselves. Because when we love greatly, we live greatly.